The emergency alarm screamed through the Galactic Federation's main command station like a wounded animal. Red lights flashed across the massive control room as dozens of alien officers rushed to their stations. The sound was one every being in the galaxy feared the distress call that meant children were in danger. Admiral Park Ji-ho, a tall figure with graying hair and tired eyes, stood at the center of it all. His uniform bore the scars of 30 years of service, and his face showed the weight of decisions that had saved millions of lives. But right now, watching the holographic display flicker with incoming data, he felt helpless. "Report," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Commander Lee Dobbin." His second-in-command rushed over with a datapad clutched in her trembling hands. Her usually perfect uniform was wrinkled, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air of the command center. "Sir, we have a code black situation. Colony Transport Hope's journey has been captured." Her voice cracked slightly. 50,000 children, Admiral. Ages ranging from 3 to 16 standard years. 12 different species. Ji-ho felt his blood turn to ice. The Hope's journey was supposed to be the safest ship in the galaxy. It carried young ones from various worlds to the new colony on Kepler-4 for Tubi, where they would grow up together in peace. The ship had enough defensive systems to fight off pirates and enough speed to outrun most threats. "Where?" he demanded. 3 parsecs from the Kepler junction. They were following standard shipping lanes when ... double quotes Dobbin's voice trailed off. "When what, Commander?" "When they vanished from all sensors. No distress call, no emergency beacon. Nothing for 6 hours. Then this." She activated the main screen. The hologram showed a massive black ship shaped like a dagger, its hull covered in spikes and weapon ports. The Veltar Syndicate's signature vessel. Round it, smaller ships moved like hungry sharks, their dark metal hulls gleaming with threat. "The Syndicate," Ji-ho whispered. Every parent in the galaxy knew that name and feared it. They were slavers who specialized in taking the young. Children were valuable. They could be trained, broken, molded into whatever their buyers wanted. The thought made Ji-ho's stomach turn. "Sir, there's more," Dobbin continued. "We intercepted a transmission from the Syndicate leader. They're demanding 50 million credits for the children's release. They've given us 72 hours? 72 hours? Ji-ho's fists clenched. "What about our response fleet?" Dobbin's face went pale. "Admiral, the third fleet, they're gone." The command center fell silent except for the hum of computers and the distant thrum of the station's engines. Officers from a dozen different species, tall blue-skinned Andromedans, insect-like Zephyrians, crystalline beings from the spiral arm all stared at the screens in horror. "Gone?" Ji-ho's voice was barely a whisper. "All 17 ships. Admiral Chen's flagship, the destroyers, the support vessels. Everything." Dobbin pulled up another display. The Syndicate was waiting for them. It was a trap. Ji-ho stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of Federation ships floating in space like broken toys. Good beings had died trying to save those children. The Third Fleet had been the Federation's best experienced crews, advanced weapons, ships that had seen victory in 100 battles. And the Syndicate had destroyed them all. "Our other fleets?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The Second Fleet is engaged with the Krill Uprising in the Outer Spiral. The Fourth Fleet is fighting the Robot Rebellion on Mechanicus Prime, the Fifth Fleet." Dobbin shook her head. "They're 3 weeks away minimum." Ji-ho looked around the command center at the faces of his officers. They all knew what this meant. The Federation had built its reputation on protecting the innocent, especially children. But now, when it mattered most, they had nothing to offer but empty words and broken promises. "There has to be something," he said. "Some ship, some weapon, some ally we can call." The silence stretched on. Then quietly, Commander Dobbin spoke again. "There is one option." Her voice was so soft that Ji-ho barely heard her. The humans, every alien in the room, shifted uncomfortably. Some stepped back. Others made protective gestures with their hands or tentacles. The humans, Earth's children, the Deathworlders, who had somehow survived on a planet that tried to kill everything that lived on it. For 30 years, humanity had been part of the Federation. They served as peacekeepers, explorers, and traders. But everyone knew there was something different about them, something that made other species nervous. They were the only race that had tamed a world filled with predators, natural disasters, and deadly weather. The only species that had turned a hell planet into a paradise. The humans, Jiho repeated slowly. They have ships. They have something, Dobbin said. But sir, are we sure about this? Once we asked them for help. Once we asked them what? Dobbin looked around the room at the other officers. Sir, with respect, the humans are ... different. When they get involved in something, they don't stop until it's finished. Completely finished. Jiho thought about the reports he'd read. Human peacekeepers who had ended civil wars not through negotiation, but by making war itself impossible. Human explorers who had mapped dangerous sectors that had claimed hundreds of alien ships. Human traders who had somehow convinced the most hostile species in the galaxy to become business partners. Get me Ambassador Kim Tae-sung on Earth, he ordered. Priority Alpha? Dobbin hesitated. Sir, are you sure, once we make this call? The commander? There are 50,000 children out there. They're scared, alone, and in the hands of monsters. If the humans can save them, then we make the call. The communication array activated, sending a faster-than-light message across the galaxy to Earth. Within minutes, the main screen flickered to life, showing the face of a human male. Ambassador Kim Tae-sung looked young for a diplomat, barely 40 by human standards. His black hair was perfectly styled, his suit was immaculate, and his expression was calm and professional. But his eyes held something that made even veteran fleet officers uncomfortable. They were the eyes of a predator that had learned to wear the mask of civilization. Admiral Park, Kim said in perfect galactic standard, his voice carrying. Just a hint of accent? I assume this is about the children? Jiho blinked in surprise. How did you know? We monitor all Federation emergency channels. Been tracking the situation since the Hope's journey went missing. Kim's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dangerous eyes. The answer is yes. Ambassador, you don't understand the scope of what we're asking. The Syndicate has 17 heavy cruisers, dozens of support ships, and they're holding 50,000 hostages. Our entire Third Fleet was destroyed trying to... Admiral Kim interrupted, his voice quiet but carrying absolute certainty that made the hair on Jiho's neck stand up. They took children. We'll handle it. The transmission ended with a soft click, leaving the command center in total silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the alien officers began to return to their stations, their movements careful and precise. Sir Dobbin whispered, What have we done? Jiho stared at the blank screen where the human ambassador's face had been. In those final moments, he had seen something in Kim's eyes that both terrified and comforted him. It was the look of a parent who had just learned that someone had threatened their child. We've just reminded the galaxy, Jiho said quietly. Why humans are the only species that survived a death world? Deep beneath the bustling streets of Seoul, in a bunker that could survive a direct hit from a planet killer weapon, the most powerful humans in the galaxy gathered around a table that had seen decisions reshape entire star systems. The underground war room was carved from solid bedrock, its walls lined with screens showing every corner of human space. This was where humanity's deadliest secrets were kept, and where the most terrible decisions were made. President Choi Min-ho walked through the heavy blast doors, his footsteps echoing in the silence. At 62, he had led humanity through 3 galactic crises, 2 alien invasions, and countless diplomatic nightmares. His gray hair and lined face showed the weight of leading a species that the rest of the galaxy both feared and needed. But today, something different burned in his eyes. The cold fury of a father whose children were in danger. Options, he said, without sitting down, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. General Yoon Sora stood at attention, beside the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the room. At 45, she was the youngest. General in human history. Promoted after single-handedly stopping an alien invasion fleet with nothing but 3 destroyers and pure tactical genius. Her fingers danced across the control panel, bringing up a 3-dimensional map of the galaxies. Outer Rim. The Veltar Syndicate has established a fortress position in the Darien system, she reported, her voice crisp and professional. Intelligence shows 17 heavy cruisers, 43 destroyers, and at least 60 support vessels. There, using asteroid fields for cover and have deployed sensor nets across all approach vectors, the display zoomed in, showing the enemy formation. Dark, angular ships bristling with weapons surrounded a cluster of captured vessels, including the Hope's Journey. Red dots marked the positions of gun platforms and missile launchers hidden among the space rocks. They're not just raiders anymore, Admiral Kong Hojin added from across the table. The old veteran had fought in humanity's first contact war 30 years ago and bore scars from energy weapons that had nearly killed him. This is a full military operation. They knew the Federation would respond, and they were ready. Minho studied the display, his mind calculating distances, weapons ranges, and tactical possibilities. Our available assets. Standard response. Would be elements from our 3rd exploration fleet, Hojin replied carefully. The cruiser Soul's Pride for destroyers and support vessels. But Mr. President. He paused, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. But this isn't standard, Sora finished. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Children, 50,000 of them. Ah. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of computers and life support systems. Every person in that bunker knew what those words meant. Humanity had fought wars over resources, territory, and politics. They had negotiated treaties, made compromises, and accepted losses.
But children were different.
Children were the line that could never be crossed. Minho closed his eyes. For a moment, he wasn't the president of the Terran Republic. He was a father remembering his own daughter's first steps. Her first words, the way she used to climb into his bed during thunderstorms. Every human leader had that same memory, that same protective instinct burned into their DNA by millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill their species every single day. When he opened his eyes, the decision was made. Words that came out of his mouth would echo through history, like the sleepers. Across human space, signals traveling faster than light reached destinations that didn't officially exist. Hidden shipyards buried deep inside asteroids suddenly blazed with activity as automated systems that had been dormant for years roared to life. Emergency lights bathed massive construction bays in red as crews rushed to stations they had drilled on but hoped never to use in the Titan shipyards. Concealed within the largest asteroid in the belt, Captain Bae Seung-min felt his communicator vibrate with the activation sequence he had memorized 15 years ago. Around him, the TNS never again stretched like a metallic mountain, 2 kilometers of weaponized death that had never appeared on any official roster. The ship was beautiful in the way that apex predators were beautiful. Its hull was matte, black, designed to absorb sensor sweeps and electromagnetic radiation. Weapon ports lined its flanks like the eyes of some ancient sea monster, and its engines could push it to speeds that violated several laws of physics. All stations, this is actual Seung-min broadcast to his crew of 800, his voice carrying through every corridor and compartment of the massive vessel. We have received activation codes. Priority Alpha. Children are involved. He didn't need to say anything else. Every human on that ship understood what those words meant. The communications officer, who had 2 daughters back on Mars, the weapons specialist whose son was starting school on Europa, the engineer who sent pictures to her grandchildren every week, they all knew that somewhere in the galaxy, someone had made the mistake of threatening Earth's most precious resource. The reactor cores that had been running on standby for years suddenly roared to full power. Weapon systems that had been tested only in simulation began their charging sequences. The artificial gravity stabilized as the massive ship prepared to move for the first time in over a decade. Captain, the tactical officer reported. All systems green. We are ready for combat operations. Time to target. 47 hours at maximum burn, sir? Sungmin nodded. 47 hours to cross half the galaxy and deliver humanity's answer to anyone who dared harm their young. Meanwhile, so dense that most species considered it impassable. Fleet Admiral Shin the Jin stood on the bridge of the TNS Nowhere Left to Run. The ship was humanity's most classified secret, a vessel so advanced that its existence was known only to a handful of people in the entire galaxy. Unlike the brutal efficiency of the Never Again, this ship was elegant, almost organic in design. Its hull seemed to ripple and shift in the nebula's light, as if it were alive. Around her, holographic displays showed 17 other vessels of the Shadow Fleet materializing from their hiding places. Ships that had been sleeping in the dark, between stars, waiting for the call that every human hoped would never come. Some emerged from hollowed-out asteroids. Others simply appeared as if they had been invisible all along. Admiral, her communications officer, called out, "All Shadow Fleet elements report ready for deployment." The Jin walked to the main viewport. Looking out at the swirling gases of the nebula that had hidden them for so long, she was 53 years old and had spent the last 20 years of her life preparing for this moment. Every simulation, every drill, every sleepless night had been leading to this. "Navigation, plot a course for the Darien system," she ordered. Her voice calm despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "Maximum burn. Send word to all fleet elements we move as one." Admiral, her tactical officer, called out, "Estimated time to target." The Jin turned from the viewport and her smile was cold as the space between stars. 47 hours. The Syndicate has 47 hours to pray to whatever gods they believe in. As the human fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, a single message was transmitted to Federation Command. No encryption, no military codes, just simple words that would be remembered long after the battle was over. "Stand clear. Humanity is going to work." In the depths of space, engines that had been built to crack planets began to sing their deadly song. The monsters were waking up, and the galaxy was about to remember why humans were the only species that had survived a death world. The sleeping giants stirred, and their dreams were full of fire. The Veltar, Syndicate's flagship blood prophet, hung in the darkness of the Darien system like a disease made of metal and malice. The massive vessel was a nightmare of sharp angles and weapon ports, its black hull covered in spikes that served no purpose except to strike fear into anyone who saw it. Around it, dozens of smaller ships formed a protective barrier. Velthax stood on the bridge of his flagship, his 4 yellow eyes scanning the holographic displays that showed his fleet's position. He was a creature of nightmares, 7 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor that had grown from his own body, with claws that could tear through steel. Species had evolved as apex predators on a world where mercy was weakness, and he had built his reputation on being the cruelest of them all for 30 years. Velthax had raided the shipping lanes, taking what he wanted and destroying what he couldn't use. But children were different. Children were profit. They could be trained, broken, shaped into whatever their buyers desired. The 50,000 young ones locked in his cargo holds would make him the richest being in the Outer Rim. "War leader," his sensor operator called out, his voice trembling slightly. The small insect-like creature's antennae twitched nervously as he studied his instruments. "I'm detecting incoming vessels. 18 ships dropping out of FTL at maximum sensor range." Velthax's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among his kind. "Federation response fleet, negative war leader. These signatures. They don't match anything in our database. The ships appear to be using some kind of stealth technology we've never seen before." On the main screen, fuzzy images resolved into shapes that made no sense. The human ships didn't look like the sleek, elegant vessels that most civilized species built. Instead, they were angular, predatory things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each one bristled with weapon systems that the Syndicate's computers couldn't identify, the sound like grinding metal. Whatever species this is, they've made a fatal mistake. The main screen flickered, interference patterns dancing across it before resolving into the image of something that made. Several of Velthak's S-Bridge crew stepped back in instinctive fear. A human female stared at them through the transmission, her pale skin and dark hair marking her as one of the legendary Deathworlders. But it was her eyes that truly unnerved them, cold, calculating, completely without fear. Fleet Admiral Shin the Jin wore a dark military uniform with no decorations, except for a single patch showing. Earth's blue marble against the black of space. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and professional, but underneath it was something that made Velthak's predatory instincts scream warnings. "Veltar Syndicate," she said in perfect galactic standard, though her accent marked her as coming from the Sol system. "I am Fleet Admiral Shin of the Terran Defense Force. You are holding 50,000 children from 12 different species. You will release them immediately and surrender yourselves for processing." Velthak's translator rendered her tone perfectly, and he realized with growing unease that this wasn't a request or even a demand. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the confidence of someone who had never failed to achieve their objectives. "Human," Velthak sneered, activating his own transmitter and letting his voice carry all the menace he could muster. "You are outnumbered more than 3-1. Your 18 ships against my entire fleet. Withdraw immediately, or I begin executing the hostages, starting with the youngest." For a moment, the Jin's expression didn't change. Then slowly, she smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Velthak had ever seen, not because it showed anger or rage, but because it showed absolutely nothing at all. It was the smile of a predator that had just confirmed its prey was exactly where it wanted it to be. "You have made your choice," she said simply. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Blood Prophet in silence. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The human ships hung motionless in space, dark and silent as tombstones. Then, without any warning or ceremony, space itself seemed to come alive with death. The TNS never again led the charge, its massive bulk accelerating. Two speeds that should have been impossible for something so large. Captain Bae Seung-min stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display as syndicate ships scrambled to form defensive formations. His crew worked with the smooth efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. "Dull weapons. Target their engine sections first," he ordered calmly. "We want prisoners to question about their operations. But if they resist..." He left the sentence unfinished. Everyone knew what it meant. The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves, each ship perfectly coordinated with the others through quantum-entangled communication systems that allowed them to react faster than the speed of light. Ships that should have been too massive for such maneuvers twisted through space with impossible grace, their hulls seeming to bend and flow like living things. The Syndicate opened fire first, their plasma cannons and missile batteries unleashing a barrage that would have vaporized any normal fleet. Streams of superheated energy crossed the void, followed by waves of nuclear-tipped warheads. It was enough firepower to crack a moon, but the human ships weren't there anymore. They moved like ghosts, like shadows, like nightmares that couldn't be pinned down by conventional targeting systems. Syndicate gunners watched in horror as their shots passed through empty space where human vessels had been microseconds before. The Deathworlders' ships seemed to dance between the incoming fire, their movements so fluid and precise that it looked almost like choreography. "Impossible," Velthak whispered, his four eyes wide with disbelief. "Nothing that large can move like that." Then humanity's weapons spoke for the first time. There was no dramatic light show, no thunderous explosions. The human ships simply flickered for an instant, and then 17 Syndicate vessels simply stopped existing. Didn't explode or break apart. They were there one moment and gone the next, reduced to their component atoms by weapons that operated on principles the Syndicate couldn't even comprehend. "Evasive maneuvers," Velthak screamed at his crew. "All ships, scatter formation." But it was too late. The human fleet had already moved to their next positions, peering behind Syndicate vessels that thought they were safely out of range. More ships died, the crews never even realizing they were under attack until the moment their existence ended. The Blood Prophet, shuddered as something struck its shields. Velthax looked at his tactical display and saw small objects attached to his ship's hull, boarding pods, barely large enough to hold a few soldiers each. He laughed at the audacity of it. Boarding parties? They think they can take my ship with boarding parties? He activated the internal defense systems, automated turrets that would shred any intruders. Kill them all. Turrets fired for exactly 3 seconds before going silent. On the security monitors, Velthax watched human soldiers move through, his ship's corridors like death given form. They wore black combat armor that made them look more like machines than living beings, their movements precise and economical. Every shot they fired found its target, every grenade they threw cleared entire compartments of defenders. "Sir," his communications officer stammered, "they're cutting through the blast doors like they're made of paper." "How is that possible?" Velthax didn't answer. He was too busy watching his elite warriors, creatures bred for violence and trained from birth to kill, being systematically eliminated by a force that seemed to understand war on a level his species couldn't comprehend. These weren't just soldiers. They were apex predators who had evolved on a world that had tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. The bridge's blast doors, 3 feet of reinforced titanium alloy that could withstand direct hits from heavy weapons, exploded inward in a shower of molten metal. Through the smoking breach stepped Lieutenant Colonel Park Min-jun, his combat suit making him look like something from a nightmare. The armor was matte black, covered in sensors and weapon systems, and it moved with his body like a second skin. Behind him, 20 human Marines advanced with mechanical precision, their weapons trained on every member of the bridge crew. Their faces were hidden behind tactical visors. But Velthax could feel their eyes on him, measuring him, evaluating him like a piece of equipment. Min-jun removed his helmet, revealing a face that could have been carved from stone. His dark eyes showed no emotion as he studied the bridge, cataloging every detail, every possible threat, every avenue of escape. When he spoke, it was in perfect Veltar dialect, his pronunciation flawless despite the alien nature of the language. "Children," he said simply, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. "Where?" Velthax reached for the weapon at his side, his predatory instincts overriding his tactical sense. The human didn't even seem to move, but suddenly, Velthax found himself on the floor, his arm bent at an impossible angle, staring up at the barrel of a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy. "Wrong answer," Min-jun said calmly. "Let me ask again. Where are the children?" Around the bridge, the other syndicate officers cowered as human Marines secured the area with professional efficiency. These weren't conquerors come to gloat over their victory. They were exterminators, come to solve a problem that threatened what they held most sacred. And in that moment, Velthax finally understood the mistake he had made. He hadn't just captured some random hostages. He had taken the children of the galaxy's most dangerous species. He had awakened the monsters. Now they had come for their young. The rescue operation began at exactly 1432 Galactic Standard Time, and it unfolded with the precision of a surgical strike performed by the hands of death itself. Human boarding teams moved through the captured syndicate ships like ghosts made of steel and determination, their bioscanners penetrating through layers of reinforced hull plating to detect the faintest heartbeat, the smallest breath of a frightened child hidden in the darkness. Lieutenant Colonel Park Min-jun led the primary assault team through the corridors of the Blood Prophet, his tactical display showing the locations of every life sign aboard the massive vessel. The children were being held in converted cargo bays deep within the ship's belly, behind blast doors and energy barriers that would have stopped any conventional rescue attempt, but humans had never been conventional. "Thermal charges, 30 seconds," he whispered into his comm unit as his team reached the first barrier. The explosive devices his engineers placed weren't designed to destroy, they were designed to create precise openings that would allow access without risking the lives of the hostages beyond. The blast door dissolved, like ice under a blowtorch, revealing a sight that made even hardened veterans pause. Hundreds of children from a dozen different species huddled together in the dim light, their eyes wide with terror and hope. Some were barely more than babies, while others were teenagers, who had tried to protect the younger ones with their own. Council Speaker Meraldin, tall crystalline being whose body reflected the chamber's lights in rainbow patterns, shifted nervously on his platform. His species communicated partially through color changes, and right now his form was showing. Deep blues and purples, the colors of concern and unease. Admiral Shin. The Council extends its profound gratitude for humanity's decisive action in resolving this crisis. However, there are some concerns about the scope and scale of the operation that we feel must be addressed. The Jin's expression remained perfectly neutral, but several alien delegates noticed her stillness. The absolute lack of movement that predators displayed when deciding whether something was prey or threat. "Elaborate," she said simply. Meraldin S. Crystalline form flickered through several color patterns as he accessed his notes. "Your forces eliminated not just the immediate threat to the hostages, but every syndicate operation across 17 star systems, supply bases, communication networks, financial centers, recruitment facilities. Everything was systematically destroyed." Some council members questioned whether this response was proportionate to the initial crime. A ripple of movement went through the human delegation as several officers exchanged glances. In the gallery reserved for ambassadors, Kim Tae-sung slowly rose from his seat. At 42, he was young for a galactic diplomat, but his eyes held the same dangerous quality that made other species nervous around humans. "Council Speaker," Kim's voice carried clearly across the vast chamber, cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. 50,000 children were taken from their families and sold into slavery. Humanity's response was exactly proportionate to that crime. But the complete destruction of an organization that had operated for over a century, another delegate began. "It's necessary," Kim interrupted, his tone becoming sharper. He activated the holographic projector at his station, filling the air. Above the chamber with a three-dimensional star chart, red dots marked former syndicate territories, now empty and monitored by automated warning buoys. "Let me be perfectly clear about something. Honored delegates. For 30 years, humanity has served this Federation faithfully. We've been your peacekeepers when conflicts arose, your explorers when dangerous sectors needed mapping, your trade partners when economic cooperation was required. We've been the helpful neighbors who fix your problems and ask for very little in return." He paused, letting his words sink in, while the star chart rotated slowly above their heads. "But children are different. Children represent the future of every species, the continuation of life itself. They are the line that cannot be crossed. Ever." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds as delegates began speaking in dozens of languages simultaneously. Some species communicated through color changes, others through chemical emissions, and still others through electromagnetic pulses. The translation systems struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations. Kim waited for the noise to die. Don then continued. "Any organization, government, or individual that targets juvenile members of any Federation species for slavery, trafficking, exploitation, or harm will be considered an active enemy of Earth and subject to immediate military response." Implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. Several delegates began urgent consultations with their home governments, while others sat in stunned silence. The gas-based entities in their atmospheric suits began swirling in agitated patterns. The aquatic species water tanks bubbled with increased activity. Council Speaker Meraldin S. Crystalline forms cycled through rapid color changes as he processed the proposal. "Ambassador Kim, this compact would essentially give humanity unilateral authority to conduct military operations anywhere in Federation. Space where they perceive a threat to children." "Correct," Kim replied without hesitation. "And if the Federation Council rejects this compact, then humanity will formally withdraw from Federation space and handle child protection independently across the galaxy. We prefer cooperation, honored speaker, but we don't require it." The chamber fell into absolute silence. Every delegate understood what those words meant. capability to destroy a century-old criminal empire in less than a week. If they chose to operate independently, no force in the galaxy could stop them. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. As the session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Fleet Admiral Shin walked through the corridors of the Federation complex with measured steps. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of maintenance crews already beginning to install new security protocols, enhanced scanning systems for any vessel carrying juvenile passengers, graded communication networks for faster response to threats, and quantum-encrypted emergency channels that would reach Earth in milliseconds. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from the Sol system. President Choi Min-ho's weathered face appeared on the small screen, transmitted across thousands of light years in real time through humanity's quantum communication network. Admiral. Exactly as expected, Mr. President. Fear mixed with gratitude, seasoned with a healthy dose of respect. They understand now what happens when someone threatens our young. Good. What's the status of our forces? The Shadow Fleet is returning to standby positions as we speak. The monsters are going back to sleep in their hidden bases, waiting for the next time they're needed. Min-ho nodded slowly. Until someone else makes the mistake of crossing that line. Until they're needed again, the Jin agreed. Across the galaxy, in the former territories of the Veltar Syndicate, space remained empty and silent. Automated warning buoys broadcasted the same message in every known language. This sector is under Terran protection. Any vessel carrying juvenile passengers will be escorted to safety. Any vessel targeting such passengers will be destroyed. Criminal organizations that had operated in the shadows for centuries quietly released any young captives they held and permanently removed children from their target lists. Pirates who had once raided colony ships now avoided any vessel with families aboard. Slavers who had built their fortunes on trafficking young beings suddenly found other lines of work. The message was crystal clear across the galaxy. Earth was watching, on 1,000 worlds, in cities of crystal and metal, in underwater colonies, and floating habitats, in space stations and generation ships. Parents tucked their children into bed with a new sense of security. They knew that somewhere in the dark, between the stars, the Deathworlders stood guard with weapons that could crack planets and a determination that had never failed. The humans had shown their true face to the galaxy, not conquerors or destroyers, but guardians, protectors who would cross any distance, pay any price, and face any enemy to keep the innocent safe. In the depths of space, hidden shipyards powered down their forges and returned to silent vigil. The TNS nowhere left to run, and her sister ships faded back into the darkness. Their crews rotating on long shifts, always ready for the next call, because some lines, once drawn in blood and starfire, could never be uncrossed, and every being in the galaxy now knew exactly where humanity had drawn theirs. The monsters slept, but they dreamed of fire, and their dreams were full of children's laughter. The end.